He can fly me to the moon.
welcome to the North College Hill Council meeting for December 6th. I'd like to first say congratulations to the University of Cincinnati Bearcat football team for winning the conference championship and going to the playoffs. That made me excited. So, second, what makes me excited is to see Mr. Hedger here to be our clerk of council. So welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back in a new role. Good to see you, Mr. Hedger. All right, with that, we will get our meeting started. Can you grab my gavel? Get our meeting started with our
First day on the job.
prayer.
I forgot the gavel.
Everybody stand, please. I just noticed it wasn't there. I thank you, sir. There's a block of wood, but we're all right. All right. God our Father, we are all your servants. We trust in your mercy and love. We trust also in your guidance. Direct the meetings of this council of North College Hill to make good decisions for all the people who live in our city. Give all the members of this council wisdom and insight to know what is best for our city. Help us to be fair and just in all our decisions. Bless us all to do the very best we can. With your help and guidance, we pray this in your name. Amen. We will call this meeting to order. Please face the flag for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Hedger, please proceed with the roll call.
Roll call. Dukestein.
Present.
DeWald.
Here.
Underwood.
Present.
Miller Novak.
Present.
Zorb.
Here.
Blythe.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. All right, you have tonight's agenda. I do want to make a note that I was hoping to have the 11:15 minutes for tonight, but I do not have them, so we will strike that from this copy of the agenda.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion, we accept the agenda with that modification.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Ms. Zorb to accept tonight's agenda with the one change of removing the 11:15 minutes from the agenda. Second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Dukestein.
Present.
We're at the yes part.
I know, he said please call the roll, so I thought you were saying yes.
DeWald.
I forgot, what are we doing?
The
Accept
I'm
agenda.
seconding, I'm
Minutes,
sorry.
I mean.
I've got to calm down.
Agenda.
Yes,
Underwood.
Yes.
Miller Novak.
Yes.
Zorb.
Yes.
Blythe.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you do have minutes from the 11:1 meeting. Note that it was pointed out that they say 11:2 at the top of the minutes, and the meeting did occur on 11:1.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wald?
in regards to the minutes, I have been playing 52 pickup with legislation and agendas with Mr. Hedger, and I do believe I left my minutes over there, so I'll get them after the meeting.
Maybe.
Don't worry about it. Just print me a copy when the night's over. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'll motion we accept the minutes for the November 1st, 2021 meeting.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
I'll second that.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I would just like to point out one teeny little thing. Where it should say trunk or treat, it repeatedly says truck or treat. So maybe we can, it's just a little tiny thing, but it's like whenever someone mentioned trunk or treat, it says, yeah, but other than that,
Noted.
okay.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion from Ms. Zorb to accept the minutes for the November 1st meeting, second by Ms. Anderson. Please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Abstain. I've not had a chance to read them.
Underwood,
Yes,
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 6-0 with an abstention. All right, next on the agenda is communication. Do we have any communication, sir?
I do have communications from OKI. The letter reads, "The term of your current representative in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments Board of Directors for 2021 will expire upon convening the Board Directors Council on January 13th, 2022. In order for the new Board of Directors to be duly convened, the Board of Directors, it is required that your agency submit the name of its appointment to the OKI Board of Directors. When your agency has taken official action to designate its representative, please return the enclosed form to the secretary. Your reply is needed as soon as possible, no later than January 7th, 2022. And it has the form here for the OKI representative. My understanding is someone has been selected.
Yes, right, we did select that 2 meetings ago.
And that's Mrs.
President.
DeWald.
Yes,
DeWald?
myself,
That's what
yes.
I thought. Okay. Didn't want to speak out of turn, but I felt like we had done that. Any other communication, sir?
I have nothing further.
All right, thank you. That'll take us to council committees, city, community development, and recreation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is next Monday, the 13th at 6:30 p.m. here in council chambers.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Next is budget and finance.
So we've had technically 2 meetings since our last council meeting. I think that's right. But at any rate, the committee's obviously been pretty dedicated to discussing the budget. And then we had a committee of the whole meeting to discuss the budget further. And I think it would be redundant to hash out everything that was discussed, since most of us, if not all of us, have been at all these discussions anyways. I think our next meeting is this coming Monday at 7 p.m. right here. I have asked the administration to get us a salary ordinance that was reflective of some of our desires we discussed on the budget, as well as to reach out to Mr. Dieters regarding his contract. So those things should be available at our next finance committee meeting to discuss, plus anything else that the administration might ask me to also discuss during the same meeting. There you go.
Okay, next meeting is December 13th at 7:30? 7:30. Okay, thank you. Rules and public policy?
thank you, Mr. President. We last met on November 22nd at 6:30. We talked about the traffic ordinances and how a different committee has taken up that particular issue. Under old business, we talked about legislative procedure. Mr. Miller Novak left us, so we'll have to, Ms. Underwood is going to take up that project. We talked about council rules, and Ms. Underwood is going to do an audit. I'm talking about myself in the third person. I'm going to do an audit of all the minutes to try to figure out like which rules we've discussed, and then we'll bring that back to the full council. Also talked about the process for committee meetings, minutes, and agendas. The council rules state that these need to be sent to the council clerk. So then that person will then need to decide what needs to be done with that. So with this being more of an administrative issue, council should only give their opinion. So we plan to send that back to council with that recommendation. Summer session, we talked about summer session and why we believe summer session is unnecessary. We talked about people's vacations and absences, and in most cases that, excused absences are not really an issue. So that's something that we're going to send back to council as well. There was no new business. And we adjourned at 6:58 p.m. We were very efficient.
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak?
I know that I wasn't able to maintain the commitment, but if you ever need me present for some reason, Ms. Underwood, all you need to do is call upon me, and I will try to attend to a meeting or two for some reason if you think I'd be helpful on a particular topic.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
Mr. Miller Novak, we weren't trying to give you any digs or
I
anything.
know it wasn't a
We
dig.
love you to death.
I
but
know it wasn't a dig.
I was just explaining why it wasn't done, that's all. It's okay.
I'm just offering.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
no
you.
dig taken. Thank you.
Your next meeting is December 27th, at 6:30.
Yes.
All right, next, public safety.
We also met on November 22nd, and at 7:30, we were joined by Chief Schrand. We had a very good discussion with Chief Schrand. He explained several parts of a very detailed report that he sent to our committee. We pointed out several portions of the report that we don't believe that it's necessary to send to council. That we need to continue that discussion with Chief Schrand. So he plans to come back to our next meeting. We also asked him about multiple incidents of fighting on a particular street. And he said that Chief Schrand suggested that community members should call 911 if there's something happening in progress instead of calling the non-emergency number, because the non-emergency number is a different response than just calling 911. 911 will, if there are officers in North College Hill available, they'll respond, but if not, then someone who offers mutual aid will respond. So, for anyone listening, if there's something in progress and there's an emergency or it needs to be addressed immediately, you should call 911. Other than that, we talked about the traffic calming study, and we believe that we need to invite Chief Fells and Chief Schrand to our meeting to go more deeply into the traffic calming study and how to address or take up some of the suggestions in our traffic calming study that was done for us. Also, Prospect Place, because I'm going to keep bringing up Prospect Place. Ms. Anderson suggested that it be taken off the agenda. But Mr. Mosby offers some context as to why it should be kept on the agenda. Ms. Underwood agrees that it should be kept on the agenda, so she's going to leave Prospect Place on the agenda as old business. Even though it is on the list of streets that will be fixed or to be fixed. There's no time that it will be. We also talked about speed humps. Ms. Blythe inquired as to whether or not any of the speed humps have been installed, and Mr. Mosby informed us that they had purchased speed humps or speed bumps as opposed to speed humps. So we want to actually have a deeper discussion as to whether we prefer the speed humps as opposed to the speed bumps. The speed bumps are a smaller, more intrusive kind of bump in the street, and it requires anchors to go into the concrete, which will cause damage to the streets as well as damage to any public safety vehicle that needs to cross over them quickly, whereas speed humps, sort of similar to the ones that are located on Bobolink, cars slow down to go over them, and they won't cause the same level of damage. So we are going to have a further discussion with Mr. Mosby about that. That meeting was adjourned at 8:47 p.m. And our next meeting is December 27th. I believe that Chief Fells will send a representative from the fire department to kind of give us an update and give us some further information.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. Next on the agenda is ad hoc.
Sorry. Thanks to Miss Anderson for typing the minutes for both of those meetings.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
I'm just double checking. We still have our meetings on December 27th, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was just making sure. Okay, thank you.
All right, ad hoc reports. Are there any ad hoc reports? All right, hearing none, we'll move to administrator reports. Mayor Nichols is under the weather this evening and is not with us, so there will be no mayor's report.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mosby.
if I may, I did talk to Mayor Nichols, and there were a couple things that she did want to express,
Okay.
if I may do
So-
that. Excuse me. So first, she wanted to make sure that all of council was aware that tomorrow night, the Unified Progress Committee meeting will be canceled, and the Newark College Hill Chamber is having their holiday party tomorrow night at the Senior Center from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and so she wanted to remind all of council of that. By the way, the chamber has invited everyone, not only council members as well as employees from the city, so I would absolutely encourage everyone to attend if they can, even if it's just for a little while. Also, she wanted to thank everyone who participated in the Christmas tree lighting, which was a very wonderful event this year. It actually grew from last year. And then finally, she wanted to extend kudos to the Public Works Department for the lighting, for the seasonal lighting. As she had explained to me, she had received a lot of very nice comments about that, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. I agree. The lights look great. All right. Next up is the city administrator's report. Mr. Mosby?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to welcome Mr. Hedger back to this great office space, the city center. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
I look forward to working with you. I also had some other good news. We had a police officer who did pass his test, and this is Officer Wiley, who is going to be promoted to lieutenant. And so next council meeting, I wanted to make sure that we had him here so that the presentation would be able to be done in front of council and everybody would be able to participate. And then finally, I did want to bring to everyone's attention, because I know I've been talking a lot about Hamilton Avenue. We had combined that project, we combined with, or partnered with, excuse me, Mount Healthy for that project. However, toward the end, Greater Cincinnati Waterworks came in and said that they wanted to use that opportunity to replace the lines on Hamilton Avenue. So therefore, what is going to happen is Greater Cincinnati Waterworks will come in, they will do the line replacement, and then whoever is selected to do the work on Hamilton Avenue will come in after that. So long story short, the project is now going to end up lasting over basically 2 construction cycles. So I did want council to be aware of that as well. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Any questions? All right, next item on the agenda is the law director's report. The law director is not with us. The next item is the finance director's report. And we do not have a finance director. So that'll take us to call of members. Ms. Dukestein?
Welcome to the new clerk. Other than that, it's very cold outside.
You're very observant. Ms. DeWald?
Thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to welcome Mr. Christian Hedger back to North College Hill. He owned several properties here. He moved around and had to move out, but here he is back again, and I'm thrilled that he's here. Especially, I'm thrilled that he's here. Also, I'd like to give kudos again to the Public Works. The lighting is beautiful, and lots of compliments I hear from my friends that drive through the city, and they're impressed with what they see. And also, if you don't have the availability to be at home like I am, our fire department has been so busy. And more times than not, when I see them, it's our equipment that I see and our firefighters and paramedics that I see. So I'm just really excited that we've passed the levy and can support the work that they do. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. DeWald. Ms. Underwood?
Thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to say welcome to Mr. Hedger, who is back with us and we can't seem to, I know you want, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but welcome back, Mr. Hedger. Can't get rid of us that easy. That's what I was going to say. I think that's all that I have. I would like to also say thank you to Chief Schran for being so willing to come out to our committee meetings and speak to us. It was a very productive conversation. I did want to say thank you there. And also thank you to Chief Schran and Lieutenant Petroselli. Am I saying that correct? They've been sending me just text with good things that the police department are doing. So I'm going to make every effort to mention those when I receive those. So I do appreciate the notes that I receive. Also, thank you very much to Chief Fells, who continues to apply for grants even though a levy has passed, and continues to be awarded grants even though a levy has passed. He's still working as hard as he ever has. So thank you so much, Chief Fells. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Miller-Novak?
All right. Welcome back. I don't want to make it a long affair because it's getting redundant, but thanks for filling in. It's a hard job to get people to do and to do well, so I'm sure you're going to be great, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to do it, so thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Zorb?
Yeah, what he said, welcome. Thanks for saying yes. And I would like to add about the lights. I want to tell Marty, thanks for putting the stars on the little teepees that are in the center thing, because the stars really add the nice touch. So thanks for the star addition. That's all I got.
I was thinking that tonight myself, driving down here. I thought, wow, this just makes it look, yeah. I
Nice
don't know what I'm
touch.
trying to say, but it's very nice. Ms. Blythe?
No comment.
Ms. Anderson?
Happy Hanukkah to our citizens who celebrate Hanukkah. Last night was the 8th night, and our kids have loved putting the candles in the menorah, so that's been a fun time. And thank you for filling in the position. Other than that, nothing to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is remarks from the audience. Mr. Hedger, is anyone signed in?
No one has signed in.
All right, next item is legislation.
First reading Resolution 31-2021, a resolution approving the retail water service agreement with the City of Cincinnati.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mosby?
just a little bit of background on this. This particular piece of legislation is one that our previous agreement with the City of Cincinnati expired several years ago. And so we've been operating on a gentleman's agreement for the past few years. However, they have come back to us and said they wanted to make sure that we finalize this. We were at one point, I think, part of a consortium, but again, some time ago, we backed out of that. So basically, this is our own agreement with Cincinnati Waterworks. I would recommend for tonight that since there is no real charge, this is just simply them agreeing to provide the water service for us, in addition to the agreement for the lead lines. That's also part of that. That was included in your resolution. But I would recommend to council to suspend the readings and pass this legislation so that we can get it to the City of Cincinnati, and then we can have it, what was the word I was thinking of? I'm sorry, can't think of the word that I was thinking of at this particular time, but we can have it agreed
Executed.
upon.
Right.
Executed, thank you very much. Don't know why my brain wasn't functioning that well, but, so that would be my recommendation, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Ms. Zorb?
Mr. Mosby, I guess I'm confused. I still had the consortium thing in my head. Do you know when we got out of that or why we got out of that? I felt like we had better rates or something with the consortium. Is that
No,
not the
not better
case?
rates, but I believe, and I wasn't here, so part of this history I am giving you from my conversations. So I believe it was like around 2017 or 2018. The previous agreement expired in 2018. And there were a couple of holdout communities. We were one, and I believe it may have been Woodlawn or someone. There was one other community that did not become part of the consortium. And so anyhow, so because we did not, we're now just entering in, to a solo agreement with them, and that's really it.
Do you remember what the benefit was to being in the consortium?
I don't know that there was necessarily any benefit. What I have learned is that the rates had been agreed upon, I guess, in essence, in the past, and this has to do with just for newer members of council. This had to do with the building of the convention center, and they, being the city, wanted to add basically a premium to our rates, and the consortium basically at that point said, we're not getting any benefit from that. And so what they agreed to do was to keep our rates the same, which is what this agreement is, through 2047. So the rates that we would be paying are going to be the same rates that basically every other, not basically, every other municipality, every other city pays, city or village. Townships pay a different fee.
Thank you.
Mr. Mosby made a recommendation. Does anybody want to move to suspend readings?
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'll move that we suspend the second and third reading for Resolution
31.
31.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All right, motion by Ms. Underwood, second for Ms. Anderson to suspend second and third readings on Resolution 31-2021. Mr. Edger, please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
No.
Blythe,
Yes.
Yes.
Anderson.
That
Ms.
motion passes 6-1.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I move that we adopt Resolution 31-2021.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Underwood, second by Ms. Anderson to adopt Resolution 31-2021. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Please continue with legislation, sir.
Second reading, Resolution 30-2021, resolution to certify assessments to the county auditor for placement on the tax duplicate, tall grass, and trash removal.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
I'm going to make a motion to suspend the third reading to get this off the books.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
I'll second that.
That's Resolution 30. All right, motion by Ms. DeWald, second by Ms. Anderson to suspend third reading on Resolution 30-2021. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I move that we adopt Resolution 30-2021.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Underwood, second by Ms. DeWald to adopt Resolution 30-2021. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That is all for legislation. Next item on the agenda is further remarks from the audience. I will assume there are none, even as it pertains to legislation. So I'll take us to old business.
Mr. President.
Ms. DeWald?
Mr. Mosby, where do we stand with Ms. Carol Meinke and the issue that she had with the property Bising and her
Right,
backyard?
right. I apologize, I had to, so Mr. Knight, who was our buildings and inspections officer, did go out, and talk to Mr. Meinke, I believe. That's who, he talked to her husband. So There were a couple of things, though. One is that if a charge is, and this is just for everyone's information, but if a charge is going to be filed against a property owner, the property owner has to be a person. If the property owner is an LLC, a criminal charge cannot be filed against that LLC. So I had talked to not only our law director, I also talked to our prosecutor, and what they recommended, in short, was for us to work with and try to make sure and see if we can get it amicably resolved. I think at the time, because I did ask Mr. Knight whether or not, you know, we knew if the debris had been picked up. I was not given an affirmative that it was or was not. So basically, at this particular point, he's still working with them.
So let me repeat what I think I heard. Because it's an LLC, her hands are tied?
Well, I didn't say her hands were tied. What I said was that if there was going to be a criminal charge filed, it would have to be filed against a person. And an LLC is not a person.
Even though what they did was unlawful.
Correct. Well, actually, even that part, I believe, when I talked to the prosecutor, there was some question as to whether or not the debris which was in question, meaning the limbs, because as I shared it with him as I understood it, that these were like limbs that may have been coming from a tree. There was some question as to whether or not that would be defined as, like trash. So he had some ambiguity, some unreadiness about it, but basically just said, look, the best thing for us to do would be to try to resolve it amicably with basically the owners of the management of the firm and the property owner.
Mr.
Okay, so-
President,
Mr. President,
Are you finished, Ms. Doyle?
I just have one more question.
Go ahead.
I'm fighting for this particular resident because I felt that what was done to her was completely unlawful and that it should go on this long, and to have it done twice. Her property was damaged and littered and trashed on twice, and we have laws against trash and dumping. And I can't believe that just a little hiccup like an LLC is going to prevent her from getting any kind of retribution. I mean, she had damage on her property. What is it that can be done? I mean, I know you've said it before, but that doesn't seem like the right answer to me. You don't have any more answers?
Well, both properties are private properties, and both property owners are private property owners. So if there was damage that was done, there are two things. Number one, if there is, in this case, let me just use a tree. I'm not saying it was a tree, but I'm saying if it was a tree, and for some reason that debris or something fell into her yard, her insurance company could be notified, and she could be reimbursed for that. If, however, she wanted to personally go after them for damages, she could file a civil suit with them. Now, of course, that wouldn't have anything to do with us, because it would be a civil suit between two property owners.
Mr. President,
I had Ms. Underwood next, then Ms. Blythe.
so, Mr. Mosby, I have a hypothetical for you, because lawyers love these kinds of things. So let's just say an employee of this LLC is running around North College Hill and just, instead of paying for their trash service, they decide to just dump a little bit of trash in everybody's yard. Are we then now trying to say that there's nothing we can do to them because they're an LLC? I think that there's got to be some kind of way or creative way that we can look at fines or something that we can do. I can't imagine that because you're an employee of an LLC or you're working for an LLC, you get to just do whatever you want willy-nilly, because if that's if that's the message that we're sending, then, everybody will just get on the Ohio Secretary of State website, form an LLC. I could form an LLC, Erica Cell Phones LLC, and I'll just put all my trash in my neighbor's yard, right?
Cheaper than this.
Well,
Well,
there has to be something that we can do.
it's two things. Number one, I think it would be a different situation if you're talking about somebody who was actually being caught in the act doing this. My understanding in this particular case is that nobody saw what was happening. And so if you wanted to file, as you know, as an attorney, the benefit of the doubt is going to go to the accused because it has to be proven that they actually did it. So I cannot say, but in the hypothetical that you were referring to, if a person was seen doing that, that would be something different. And number one. Number two, that individual could then be held personally liable for whatever they did. If it was a criminal act, of course they could be charged. If it was a civil act, they could still go after, whoever the private property owner was, would still be able to go after the individual. But it would be, again, a civil case as opposed to a criminal. And again, I will share that, I talked to both our law director and the city prosecutor on this case.
Ms. Blythe?
Mr. Mosby, has this apartment complex LLC, has the city officially notified them that this is an illegal act? I mean, have you sent them a letter saying, hey, we have a complaint and this is illegal? I mean, at least have they been notified as in, don't do this again, or this is not lawful for you to, trim trees and dump in a private residence property? Some type of an official letter.
They have been notified that it was brought to our attention that a property owner had some debris that was in their yard, and they suspected that it was due to some work that the property owner was had done, excuse me.
Did we send them an official letter, or was it just a phone
Again, I had
call?
Mr. Knight contact them
Okay.
personally,
Okay.
so
So
they
they
have
know.
he has contacted them officially.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So hopefully this will end.
What we're trying to do is to get it resolved in a way that we can ensure that it will not happen again, as you pointed out. But once again, I just want to be clear, because I know that this is an accusation. It was not necessarily brought to my attention first. It did come to council. And again, when I went to ask about and inquire about it, if a person is saying these people did it, they would have to be able to prove that it was them. My understanding at this particular time was that no one saw it. Now, if I'm wrong about that, I will apologize and stand corrected, but that is what I understand at this particular point in time. So we have gone out, we have contacted what I would consider the victim in this case, and we contacted the property owner of the townhomes.
Good.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
okay, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm kind of but I'm a little annoyed with the property owner, because are they suggesting that somebody came and did work on their property without their knowledge or consent and then dumped it in somebody else's yard? I mean, who else would be doing work on their property?
No, I'm not suggesting that. Again, the only thing that I'm suggesting is that the victim in this case, if I could use that term, said that this was in their property, and without sight was basically saying that this property owner was doing it. So basically an accusation was being made, but there was no evidence that they were the ones that actually did it. I think the point that you're making, which I would agree with, is that from my understanding, that they actually had someone contracted to do the work. In other words, it was not the owner themselves, but rather a contractor of the owner. And perhaps they may have done that. Now, again, what we're doing is trying to make sure that it is resolved amicably, and as Ms. Blythe actually did allude to say, this should not this doesn't need to happen again. It shouldn't happen again. So that's what we're working toward right now.
Okay, any other old business?
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
I'd like to discuss some of this budget if we could, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I am looking at line item 101, 525, 300, and this is the old budget. I haven't been able to do much comparison because we were just handed this tonight. A debt service equipment of $45,000.
Is that
525,300?
Yes,
Yes.
525, 300, debt service equipment. Do we know what it is? It's in the police.
Oh, we are, right, so, once again, one of the things that we're moving toward doing, with the police department is looking at, leasing, cars. So that is one of the things that we're projecting for 2022.
Okay. And then in Department 301 in Recreation. So it's 521120. Salaries, part-time, recreation. So it was 2,400 in 2020, and then in 2021, we projected nothing, but then in 2020, we'd like to put $20,000 in that bucket. What, can you help me out there?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I was, not only was I under the impression, but I was actually kind of looking forward to the fact that council was saying we really need to have some recreation programs, and if we're going to have recreation programs, we have to have someone who is going to be able to manage that. So that was why that amount was put in there. You are correct. So a little bit of history. There was basically a part-time salary for a recreation director, and I'm doing this certainly for the benefit of those who were not on council at the time. So we actually did have someone who was a part-time recreation director who was doing that all the way up until basically 2020 when COVID-19 hit. One of the things that we did was we said, well, you know, with everything being, for all intents and purposes, shut down, that was going to be an expense that was not necessary. And so the mayor and myself, we said that, you know, those particular services would not be needed, which is why there was nothing budgeted for that in 2021. However, as we've been working now toward a few things, one, I know there's been talk about what we're doing with the parks. I know I've shared with you all what the updates are, particularly on Dumley Park, and what we're doing there. The Unified Progress Committee was talking about making sure that we have, mulch for the playgrounds, which is one of the things that we were ordering as well. And so if we are doing this, then we're going to have someone that will be looking after, you know, the parks themselves as part of the recreation program. So that amount was added in there so that we would be able to hire someone.
Okay, so just to be clear, we've earmarked $20,000 with no clear, precise job description.
We do have a job description. Yes, we do.
Okay. So we're mulching the parks. I'm just having a hard time with $20,000 from zero.
Mr. Wall, honestly, I would say probably not, to, if I can, not to have a hard time with it. We need to have someone who's going to manage the programs, and it's not just the mulch. I was only giving the mulch as an example of something that the Unified Progress Committee was talking about. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of work that we're doing as far as installing the splash pad at Dumley Park. I was just talking to Ms. Anderson today. We were talking about what we needed to do in order to make sure that we get the playground there at Dumley Park finalized, and we're looking at trying to do something with Veterans Park as well. So with all those things going on, I think that we actually do need someone who will be able to help to manage that. And $20,000, quite frankly, is less than $2,000 a month.
Right. And just super quick about the Shaper Park. Have we had a resolve on, I mean, that plaque that's hanging up there is not near sufficient as what it should be. I heard that the Chamber of Commerce was going to put a plaque up. Do you know if that's happened yet?
I don't think it's happened at this particular point in time. It is something that will happen, though. Yes,
Okay, so
you are
that plaque-
correct. They have committed to at least replacing, and when you say plaque, I want to be clear, we're not talking about the stone plaque. We're basically talking about a more sturdy plaque that would be able to be put up and people would be
Right,
able to
because there's
see.
one hanging on the fence now that is not attractive,
Correct.
nor is the information complete. So the next item I'd like to talk about is in recreation still, and it's 524-2000, $30,000. And I can't remember if this was discussed in the last meeting or not, because we had nothing for the years previous.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson.
I just want to comment something you said earlier, Ms. Ewald, about the recreation director. I know that also, I think Mr. Mosby's being humble. I mean, he and a few other employees right now are acting as the impromptu recreation directors and doing a lot of jobs that they shouldn't really have to do. So I think that the reason there's such a big jump is because we need somebody there desperately, and it shows by just how much work they're having to do right now. I mean, if we can get somebody in there to do that job, then other people can better do their jobs, and then we can run more efficiently, so.
Okay, so more, to clarify then, that's for a director, a part-time director.
Right,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, and then on that $30,000 in operating expenses for recreation.
that's for the
I
splash
think
pad.
that was for the splash park.
Mhm.
Okay. The next thing I'd like to talk about is in code
Can I
enforcement.
hold you there for a quick second?
Oh.
When's the splash pad due to be completed?
Our projection is that it will be completed, we're hoping by October of 2022.
22 or 3?
22.
22, yeah. So, and the code enforcement, and this may have been discussed. I know that there's 15,000 in here for a vehicle lease. There's $60,000 in the contracted services line. I think that may be for the increased hours that we plan to do with the code enforcement. Is that,
That is correct, yes.
now with that increased hours, is that an additional person or the same person working more hours?
Well, it would be for the expense of of having code enforcement services provided for us.
Whether it's 1, 2, or 3 people?
Correct.
Okay. And then the supplies and material is $15,000. So I'm guessing because we're going to have more people, that makes sense that that would go up. On building and zoning, and the 524000 line, I'm trying to go through these quickly because we've just, $7,500. Again, that would be Bill Knight, correct?
That would be Bill Knight, and again, it is, Bill Knight sends out a lot of
Right.
correspondence, written correspondence.
Understood.
So he needs money in the budget for that.
And then under community environment in the 449 section, and it's 523300, rents and leases.
Yes.
It seems in comparison to what we have, but what exactly is that for?
We are leasing Pies Park.
Oh, got it. Oh, now a light bulb went off on that one. Thank you.
Mhm.
Then also, under that same category, let's see, 449, the community environment, $5,910 for operating expenses. Now, what are we operating?
Well, basically what we want to do is now have some money where we can actually maintain many of our public spaces, particularly that deal with our planting or, beautification, sustainability. So that's what that is for.
Okay. Then in our basic utility service, I've noticed that it's gone up a little more than $41,000. And I guess it's been on the increase, so I guess I shouldn't be too critical of that.
That's right now for us, it's
Right.
just a best projection.
Right.
We actually don't know at this particular point, but based on some of the things, as you pointed out, that we've already experienced, plus what we are hearing and learning from others in the field, that the increase is going to be pretty significant.
And then in the mayor's administration, we have it's line item 521101, and it's the salaries for a full-time cleric. So it's gone from 10,000 to 40,000. I guess the 10,000 was a part-time position? I don't recall that. And then it's 40,000, and now it's going to be 40,800. So how long has that person been in that position?
I was trying to figure out what you were referring to as well. I think that when you were saying the 10,000, that I don't believe that was for the administrative assistant. Clearly there was, but that was in 19. We did have somebody who left in 19. Of course, we had that replaced in 20. The amount in there is basically an estimate of what we anticipate is going to be the salary for the administrative assistant.
So my concern is, how long has that person been in that position? It looks like they're going to get a raise already. I mean, I don't.
That person has been in the position since that was in August.
Okay, and then in that same category, I think we discussed this, the $7,500 in postage is for like a
I believe,
newsletter.
right, I believe I made
Right.
that in my original presentation.
And
But to
then-
be clear, for those who are listening, I appreciate the
Yeah.
question. This will be a way to be able to provide for the mayor, that the mayor will be able to communicate with the stakeholders, the residents. There has been a request, and it's been for a while. In fact, some people have, not just a request, it was basically a complaint that there was not a hard copy of
Right.
a newsletter. So that amount represents what would be able to be used to at least send out at least one newsletter.
That would satisfy so many residents. And then under training and education in that same mayor's administration for $2,500, are we training Mr. Hedger for that
No,
amount? 'Cause-
no. I want to make sure that we have training so that we can retain and keep employees.
Okay,
That's something that we have not been able to do for the past couple of years. And I believe we need to invest in our employees, or I need to invest in my employees.
okay. And then I know what that one is. Also, the operating expenses doubled, which kind of concerns me. We can, I guess, check with that or we're going to have this in a finance meeting, I hope. So also, under legislative professional services, the $18,000 for the chamber improvement, do we have an estimate from someone that says it's going to cost that much?
We do not
Or
yet.
that little?
We do not as of yet. That's kind of based on just some informal discussions that I've had, and then based on the plan that we were looking at and what would need to be required for
Okay.
that. So that's where the estimate comes from, but we have not had an official estimate from a contractor at this particular
Okay.
point in time.
So we can add more money to that if we need to, because who
You
knows?
can
what
always
it's gonna-
change it.
Who knows what it's going to cost?
It's going to be way more than that.
I know.
You know, I've been going around, I'm sorry, Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I've been taking the liberty of going to different council chambers and taking pictures, and none of them look
I
as
know.
raggedy as our council chambers, just so that everybody knows. So There we go.
Right.
I-
To be
So-
clear, you wanted to say that none of theirs have as much character as ours. Thank you.
There-
Mr. Wall, please
that's-
continue.
Yeah.
Character,
So,
yes.
and very quickly too, then on that same line item, we have $3,000. And I think that's for the outside lawyers' fees. I'd like to see that bumped up to $5,000 again. We seem to have the money, so I don't see why that couldn't happen. And let's see,
Which line item was that?
that line item is, I just moved my pen, 523,400, and that's under legislative 702.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see here.
And what was that number you wanted to see, you said?
You wanted to increase it
That's
from
3,000.
3,000 to 5,000.
Put it back up to 5,000.
Okay.
And again, we have another salaries, full-time clerk, going from, in this division, this department, is the mayor's court, 45,566 to 46,480. Again, how long has that person been in that position that requires that kind of an increase?
Mr. Wall, let me just, so I'm, again, I appreciate your question. So to be clear, and I believe I did explain this, what we were trying to do in making sure that we get a budget to council was we basically did a kind of a 2% across the board increase. To be clear, you are correct. The person who is currently in that position is not earning the same amount as the previous person did. So unless there was some overtime or something, it more than likely will not make it to that because that person's wage is not as high as
Okay.
the previous person.
Thank you. And then in the finance department, we have, let's see, what is this title? So 2020 was 34,995 was spent. We have nothing for the year 2020, and in 2021, we projected $40,000. So I think that's something, it was,
I'm not, which line
Yeah,
item again,
it's-
please?
let me get back to that line.
523,400 professional services,
Correct,
correct?
professional services.
523,400.
Correct. So that could be actually anything from, and I do mean anything from, actually, let me back up. I think I've already shared with council that we actually have some outside consultants that are working with us right now. So part of that would have to be to provide for the necessary outside consultants. In addition to if we need software help or if there are some other kind of help that we need with certain programs, and that money would be there for us in order to do that.
So here's a thought that I had after going through this budget. Isn't there a way to take some of this excessive fluff and put it into an account that's managed by council so that we know exactly where that money's going? I mean, this can get piddled away if we don't watch, because the very next line is audit fees in the financing department, and it goes from $2,500 to $22,550. That's a big jump. So, and then the operating expenses for that same department has doubled. And, well, of course, we already discussed the law director. I need to discuss that, I guess, in a finance committee meeting.
Ms. DeWalt? can I-
Yes.
You said operating expenses doubled?
Oh, I'm looking at my finger.
I apologize, I don't see that.
Okay, that is line item 524,200.
2750 to 2805 is not doubling.
Well, I was looking at, so it was, I believe that the year, we're not finished yet with 2021, right?
We're not.
So, well, that's my math, I'm sorry.
Mr. Wall, can I,
Yeah,
if I would, Mr. President, would you?
Mr. Mosby.
Okay. So you had, Mr. Wall, you made a comment, and you used a particular term, and I understand, and I believe I understand why. But I would like to say to all of council, our budget is not big. We're not operating with a $10 million budget here, especially for, police, fire. I'm talking about the basic services that we provide. So I don't really see where there is any opportunity to really put fluff. The numbers that you were talking about, the increases that are there, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of them is going to be used. And once again, council always has you always have the privilege of being able to alter line item amounts when necessary. I will say, however, that when council wants to get down to that level, it will make it more burdensome for us to be able to operate. Because even right now, that was one of the reasons, quite frankly, that I could not get the reconciliation budget done, because I have to look at every single line item, and that's where I have to make the adjustment. As opposed to if we simply did a, personnel and non-personnel, you would still obviously be able to look at what expenses are being made, but we in administration would then have the leeway in order to make the adjustments where necessary. So I would have to say that, no, I don't agree that there is fluff. We don't really have fluff. Some of the things that are actually in there have been things, which quite frankly, council knows this already, have been things that we have done without for a long period of time. And I think that sometimes we're so used to doing without that we just figure we ought to continue to do without. That's something that I don't agree with. I don't think, now there are some things I will say, because I'm not in the habit of trying to frivolously spend on, programs or things, and particularly if they're not going to be used. But I want training for the employees. That's absolutely essential. I believe that the mayor should have a budget that would reflect some of not just her authority, but also some of the privilege that she has to be able to conduct certain things that she wants to do and to make the communications that would be necessary for our stakeholders to know what is going on, as opposed to having to come to council and say, can this be done? I mean, this is the way that is done. So I just wanted to share that, because I do not believe that our budget consists of fluff.
And my apologies. My apologies. So
Mr. President.
the two things
Mr.
I wanted to
President.
mention real quick then, because I don't want to go through the rest of this. I'm going to save it for a committee meeting. And for the life of me, I can't find it in here. The council's wages,
Yes.
the line item, when I looked at it the first time, the numbers didn't match up. And can you direct me really quick where I would find that again?
They should be under
702.
legislation.
Under
702.
administration.
Department 702 legislative.
I didn't hear you.
702.
Right around page 6-ish.
What is the number?
Page 5.
No, the line item number.
702.
521120.
Yes, 521.
Okay. So there's supposed to be in this new year coming up an increase for council salaries, clerk included and president included. I couldn't make those numbers add up. I probably need to do a little more homework on this. But this was legislation that was passed when Mr. Wallert was here. I believe it was in 2017.
Okay. I will affirm that, because I know that council's wages are based on a percentage of the county
Correct.
commissioner's wages.
Correct.
However, it's a little bit different with the clerk of council. That is actually on the salary ordinance. So that will be included on the
But
salary ordinance.
I remember distinctly when we passed this ordinance that the clerk was included. The verbiage had to be changed to include the clerk.
The
I'm gonna
clerk
have to go-
is- Yeah, because the clerk is not an elected position, it's an appointed position. Now, in the ordinance, and you're right, I probably would need to go back. In the ordinance, if it did say that it was matching that, it would still, even with that, council would still have to approve the amount on the salary ordinance. Still have to
Right.
do that.
Right, so, yeah, so I was looking through that and I thought, didn't make sense. And then I do just really quick want to touch again on the Public Works.
Yes.
And you and I discussed this about a part-time employee there. Is that somebody that we're gonna keep for a
Our
while?
intent is to, yes, you know, and let me make it clear again, the mayor, I know, has a big priority on making sure that we're cleaner. If I may share, I mean, personally, I do wish that our citizens would also kind of become stakeholders and do that, but in the meantime, we are having someone that will be there to kind of, especially to focus on central business district and commercial business district.
Absolutely. Okay, then I think I'm gonna close out for now, because I'm tired of
I had Mr.
talking.
Miller Novak and then Ms. Blythe.
Okay, thank you.
Ron, what, I see where, the budget was changed from the committee of the whole meeting on, the law director's salary. What about economic development? Was that added in?
It was, but as you had requested, it was the amount in the mayor's budget was reduced by that amount. So in other words, it was taken from the mayor's budget and put into the law director's.
No, I get that, but what about economic development? I thought. we
Oh,
were
that
gonna-
is, no, I don't know if you can see it on your smartphone there, but there is in parentheses next to that, it says that a portion of that is for economic development.
Is that in the mayor's?
Yes.
What is there a line item you could tell me? Maybe it's just because it's cutting off. You
Okay, I'm
think?
sorry. So it's the line item that has $100,000 in it,
Uh-huh.
and I don't remember the number exactly right now, but that is the line item where it's included.
And that's in the mayor administration or
Correct.
100,000? Okay. All right, well, I guess another thing, I guess this is just probably like a broader point. I mean, I don't know anybody's intent here today, but I don't, keep hearing talk about it in finance committee. I mean, it was in finance committee for a bit. We talked about it in the committee of the whole, and now we're talking about it as council. I mean, we've had 4 or 5 meetings about the budget. I mean, I know I proposed a couple changes. I mean, there's been like 5 or 10 questions. I mean, I kind of feel like at this point in time that if you've had any questions or I've had questions, I'm able to call Ron and get the answers, not while in this chamber. There's nothing wrong with that. That if no one has any more proposals to actually change this, I mean, my whole thing is I don't know why we don't move it to first reading at the next council meeting, as opposed to put it back in finance. If you have further questions, I don't know why you can't call Ron and just ask him to get clarification, because, I mean, at a certain point in time, it seems pointless to have 5, 6 meetings asking 5 questions a person at each meeting when we could pick up the phone and call Ron if all we want to do is ask him questions. I think the point of meetings to me is to make suggestions as a council to actually amend the budget or make changes in priorities and spending. I know we've made a couple, I'm just not hearing any more, so, I mean, that's my 2 cents, and I'll probably move accordingly when everybody's done asking their questions tonight.
Mr.
Ask for a
President.
vote.
Ms. Blythe?
Hi, Mr. Mosby. I have 2 questions regarding the budget. I'm under Department 799 miscellaneous, and the line is 799, 526 100, and 526 200. I'm just wondering what the principal and interest is. There's a 59630 and a 12222. I'm trying to figure out what loan is that?
We have actually a couple. So I know that one of the loans that we have is for the city center here. And I don't think that expires until 2020, well, this is 2021, so it's like 2027 or 2028, something like that.
Is that for the roof of the city
No,
center?
that's not, that one is not for the roof. This
Oh,
one, I
okay.
believe, is something that was done before I even got here.
Okay.
There were certain loans that were taken out in the past. And there were, so again, and I don't have all of the records in front of me, so please forgive me, but there were some renovations that were done here, including putting separate heating units in these rooms. And so there were, I believe, 1 or 2 loans that were taken out. But anyhow, that's one of the ones that you referred to. And you are correct. The other one is for the roof, and we do have to maintain that debt service as well.
And then my second question is, I'm on a different subject. I'm in the Department 201, Service Department, and I'm on 201, 525, 300. And it's debt for service equipment, and it's 26520. I was trying to figure out what that line is.
If that's the service department, that is our, well, of course, that's our public works. I believe that one, it's not a planned debt. In other words, we don't have specifically right now any outstanding debt there.
Loans, okay.
Right. But I believe that was a placeholder in the event that there was going to, in other words, if we were looking at perhaps or making a recommendation for a longer term type of either, because there were several things that we were trying to do. One of them we've already done, one of them we've already done, which we got the signals replaced.
Okay.
I had started doing that when I first got here. We had to watch, and then during COVID, things got backed up. So this year, we were able to replace those. But then we're still looking at other things. Oh, I remember. So particularly in the back here, I think that there was going to be, we were looking at perhaps doing some work in the back, which is where we have our salt, I call it salt dome, and we have a few other things that are back there as well.
So are you, so you're reserving the money for service equipment or anything related to service that you may need to do? So
No,
you're just
the-
kind of reserving it there, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. That would be an accurate way of saying it.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
Ms.
That was
DeWald,
it.
I believe
That was
you,
it.
Yes, Mr. President, I just want to finish off by saying that I have just recently sat on this side of the room. I've not sat around for 5 or 6 meetings, and some meetings are monopolized by other folks, and I didn't get a chance to ask these questions, and I took the opportunity tonight to do that.
thank you, ma'am.
Mr. President, can I go back to something that Ms. Bly, I apologize, I
ahead,
wanted
Mr.
to
Mosey.
also clarify. So, Ms. Bly, you were saying that it was in the service department. I also wanted to just ensure that everybody is aware that when we're talking about the service department, that is the gas tax, so it's a restricted fund. In other words, we can't use it for just anything. It has to be related to our roads and public works.
Okay, so service department is a restricted fund, okay.
So one thing I do agree with Mr. Miller Novak on is it is December the 6th. I would sure like to have some legislation on the next agenda for the budget.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
so I kind of have a general question for you, because I kind of hear you kind of hinting, but you know, I'm not a money person, I'm not a budget person, so I'm looking at this, I understand rules and charter, don't understand this though. So according to the charter, you're the person who puts together the budget, right? And I think I heard you say, maybe, that it would be easier for you if there were two buckets. Don't really know what you mean there, but if you could explain that, I would appreciate that. And then I have a hypothetical for everybody. I know this is going to be crazy, so I don't want everybody to jump in. I don't want anybody to say anything. I just want everybody to just kind of consider this and think about it. What if we give him we approve these two buckets or whatever? I'm envisioning the salaries and non-salary stuff, right? And then you give us something that tells me like what exactly, like if I decide I want to drill down to, I don't know, any one of these line items, training and education. Let's say I want to go through and say, what exactly did we spend that $10,000 on? Or whatever you spent on it, that I can actually look to see that you spent $122.25 on sending, somebody to this seminar or something like that. Is that possible? Did you understand my question? I know it's kind of rambling.
I think so. When I was mentioning that you were talking about two buckets, you are correct. Basically, what I was referring to was that you would have personnel and personnel expenses, and then you would have other, basically, non-personnel expenses. And so those two numbers then, the sum of those, so personnel expenses would be everything, not just salaries, it would be, FICA, it would be dues, everything that is pertaining to personnel benefits and all that. Non-personnel would be just that. So all of the, contractual services that we have and all of the supplies and all of the dues that we pay, all of those things would then be lumped together in that non-personnel or other. And so, and the budget then would be passed in that way. It would allow for the movement of funds between individual appropriations that would allow us, administration, to have the leeway to move the money as necessary in order to accomplish, what we need to accomplish. As opposed to looking at a line item, saying, okay, we're trying to predict whether or not there's going to be enough funds in here by the end of the year. And then if we're doing that, I have to then move money from one line item to another. And typically, with our council, budgets have been passed basically at a line item level. I think you did, I will say, Ms. Underwood, I think when you were bringing up the fact of, I appreciated this, you were bringing up the fact that there were only a certain number of meetings that are scheduled for council every year, right? So the challenge is this: if we have to move money, which is what we did actually recently, right? I would have to get the legislation to you being council, and then council would have to approve it, deliberate it, whatever. That is the way it's supposed to work, but that can be long, number one. And particularly if it has to go through 3 readings, which is at the minimum 6 weeks. If it's during the summer, 2 months. A lot happens in those 2 months or 6 weeks. So it doesn't allow me the flexibility, because by the time it passes, then I'm going to already have to come back and perhaps do something else, because we do have expenses that come up from time to time that are not expected. So, yes, you are correct. My appeal to council would be to pass the legislation, to pass the budget at a higher level, more an activity level, but under a more broader subject, basically, personnel and then non-personnel, and then that would allow us to manage the money as we need to.
Okay, so, Mr. President, I just
Ms. Underwood?
have a follow-up question. So let's say we pass the budget at the activity level instead of at the line item level. Would we then get to see the not only drill down to the line items, but also kind of drill down to like what Chief Fells has? Because when you look at his budgets, he literally will drill all the way down to the penny if you want him to, which, so I'm just wondering if we're able to do that, is there any way that, we can kind of see what's going on at a deeper level?
So every month, we have usually at the end of the month, there is a report, and that report shows what the line items are, what has been budgeted, what has been expended year to date. And just as a refresher, and again, for those who haven't been here, that report is usually, so let me use actual examples. So the report for May, for example, we would take June to make sure that obviously everything is closed out, and then it would be presented at the Finance Committee meeting in July. So it would be about what we would call a month behind, but it shows where we are year to date to that month. And that does have every line item in there. So yes, so the answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Had Ms. Dukestein first.
I am confused. Sorry. I see the two buckets of money. One is more broad without a bunch of like line items. So are we saying we're using that as an account to just kind of draw things from that fit underneath whatever category is in that bucket of money? And then on the monthly basis, you will then show us what was deducted from that as opposed to what we have existing?
It would show you what was expended and what line items they were expended under. The difference is, I can use, let's just say, I'll use the police department. Now, let's say the police department has clothing for new personnel. And then they also have professional services. If they need to make a transfer between those two, they would be able to do it. It would, yes, reflect on the monthly report, but they would have the authority to do it as opposed to having to come to council and getting approval from council in order to do that.
So
That's the difference.
it's the approval process that you're
Correct.
trying to.
That's, and there's nothing, and clearly there's nothing wrong with the approval process, but as I explained, the approval process takes a period of time. And if council says, we're not going to, suspend the readings, and council then takes 3 readings, that takes a minimum of 6 weeks, and that is 2 meetings a month, or if it's during the summertime, it is 2 months.
Now that in theory, that concept of how to do the budget would apply when we have those costs that come up that haven't been allocated for it within these line items where we would need to move resources from one line item to another or show how the allocations are different than what's here. So
In
that's
essence,
the
yes.
exception to the rule, not the rule, correct? Or no?
I mean, in other words, the budget is really council giving the administration direction and saying, these are the things that we want to prioritize. That's what you were telling me as an administrator, and saying, this is how we desire to have the money that we have available spent. Because we do have to spend the money. We can't just, we're not a profit-making entity. However, in those situations where either expenditures do arise and they weren't anticipated, and if they have to be paid fairly quickly, then there has to be, there needs to be some leeway in order to be able to accomplish that. And then, of course, as you pointed out, it would still reflect in the monthly reports.
Ms. Zorb?
So, Mr. Mosby, I actually hear what you're saying about the whole 3 reading thing and not suspending readings. But there's also clearly that will have to happen this year because we don't have any of this documentation and there's only 1 meeting left. So either we're coming in for a whole lot of special meetings or we're suspending readings, only because that's just the way it is.
Yes.
The other thing that I would like to point out is you're saying that there could potentially be a delay in, say, purchasing something that isn't necessarily in this line item. And my dispute to that is we already had a semi cleanup type ordinance already this year. And there were new police tasers on that were leased. But it's also my understanding that that entire transaction had already transpired way before council even saw that legislation. So it's not like council hindered that progress because it happened before we even saw the legislation and then approved it. So kind of our council's hands were tied because it had already happened. So we had no choice but to approve it. Because the lease had already been signed, you'd already turned over our old tasers and already had the new ones. So
Well,
really, you kind of tied our hands on that one.
I won't go into detail about that right now. I would say that your account is not completely accurate, but
That's the account that we were told.
well, you were told that we needed tasers. That is true. And that was there, and the old tasers were being turned in. You were also made aware that there was one taser that, when deployed, would not fire. So we were in we were probably in what I would consider to be a fairly dangerous situation, especially if we had a police officer who had an encounter.
I'm not
Right.
passing
So,
judgment.
No, so what I'm saying is, I think, but what I'm concerned about is, as you're saying that, the way that you're saying it, and I'm not, and please understand, I'm not suggesting that you're trying to give this impression, but you're basically giving this impression, though, when you say it, that we're making these expenditures and then I'm coming back later and saying to council, oh, this is what we want to do. There are cases where absolutely that is true. If we have to make a particular purchase at that time and council isn't meeting, then yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. And you're right, I will bring it to council for passage. I would typically, in a case like that, either talk to Mr. Graver or to Mr. Miller-Novak, because he's the chair of the finance committee. So it's not to say that we're doing something that is quote-unquote underhanded, secretive, nefarious. So I am going to defend what we have done. I want to make that clear. But I will also say, though, in fairness, that I do try to make sure that I communicate with council on some of those, on those matters. We're not talking about, and actually the tasers is a good one, because that was, I understand that was a major expense that we were talking about. So in fairness, I would say, that's why I said, I don't want to say that what you were saying isn't, it is true, but it's not completely accurate. That was the point that I was trying to make.
Mr.
Can I
President.
ask what part I said was inaccurate?
Well,
I mean, we
again,
paid
the
for them in
impression
hindsight,
that you
right?
The impression that you were making was that we got together, we decided we were gonna make an expenditure, and then I would come back later and say, oh, I need to then take this to council and tell council, oh, by the way, we've already done this. It did not happen like that. It happened like we had no tasers, and we had to have something that was in place. And I knew that if we tried to purchase it, it would be a lot more. And so so what I did was I used what would be the most efficient method, which in this case was a lease.
Mr. President, I just have one more thing to say.
Okay, Ms. Orb.
So, Mr. Mosby, I feel like I'm being misrepresented in what I said, because I was not saying it was nefarious. I was not saying any of that. My only point in bringing that up is I felt like what you were saying is that the way that our charter is laid out, the process, you're saying is not, it sounded as though you're saying that doesn't work. And my rebuttal to that is, it does work, because it's not like we're tying your hands with it. It's, you have options, and that's all I was trying to say.
Well, I'm not saying, of course, the charter works, Ms. Orb. I do want to be clear about that. Can it be more effective? The answer is yes. And the way that it can be more effective is what I explained to Ms. Underwood. That instead of council looking at line items and trying to determine how much money is in each specific line item, in which case, if we have to use money, then we would have to come back to council and do, as you pointed out, a what we would consider, and it's not a cleanup, but basically it's an appropriation adjustment. Instead of doing that, we would be able to move money, certainly within certain activity levels, as necessary, so that we can operate. And then, if it comes to the end of the year and a particular activity level was overspent, then we would make that adjustment at that particular time. So that's what I'm saying. I agree with you. The charter absolutely works. The charter is effective. The charter is very much effective, especially when we maintain the lines of distinction, by the way, between legislation and administration. If I don't overstep my bounds and you don't overstep your bounds, it works fine. I agree with you.
Mr. President.
Can I get in the queue?
Yeah, you can get in the queue. I have Ms. Dukestein.
I think the relationship, and just my 2 cents on even just the exchange. I did hear you, Ms. Zorb, when you're saying, what I heard you say is that it seems as though the way that we are existingly operating isn't allowing things that are out of the ordinary to push through our process efficiently. And they are the exception to the rule based on what I asked. So then it becomes bigger than just the tasers. That circumstance pushed through just fine because there were options for Mr. Mosby to make sure that efficiently it did not cost our city more to do it later versus now. And when the council was able to come back after the decision was made by Mr. Mosby, I didn't hear an offense. Personally, I didn't hear an offense in that. And I'm not the referee, but I'm using that as kind of a foundation to say what I hear on the table, though, is effective or fast. And so in my opinion, and it may not be a popular one, and that's fine, it's like a marriage. You know, it's between two bodies. And we have to come to terms with those issues that are the exception to the rule. You know, you have your budget the way that you see it, or with the way that your I shouldn't say your budget, your parameters in which you can operate, and then we have our parameters in which we're supposed to do our jobs. But on those big exception to the rule items, do we want to push them through and give those back to administration to handle and then come to us, or do we want to decide on them together, which is how I see pushing through the charter. It doesn't, but if that's the case, then council as a group has to make the decision. We can't just not suspend readings because we just want to hear them again. We have to actually consciously engage and decide, is it necessary to hear this again and push those items through faster to be more effective? Because we do need things to sometimes speed up and have a faster way of getting through. So that means deciding to suspend readings, or do we then put it in administration's hands to make decisions on those things without us having to go through the readings process? So to me, that's the real issue, not whether Mr. Mosby pushed through tasers, and to your point, that he was able to have options. Am I wrong? 2 cents? No?
Mr. Miller Novak.
I mean, I feel like this conversation's gotten really big. And I'm just, again, looking at the calendar and the date, and I'm looking at a budget that we've discussed for a while. We've already amended it. We've made some suggestions, and we voted on some of the suggestions, and the administration's moved it. Ron, I'm not saying I disagree. I understand where you're philosophically, what you're talking about, and I can see problems with it. And I've supported the idea of talking about activity levels in the past, and I still do. I just don't think this is the time, because we've already spent a lot of time on this budget. I think in the future, whether it's next year or something like that, when we get closer, we should visit it. Maybe we should start talking about the budget sooner next year, so we can address that really broad concept and work general to specific, the old Gestalt theory. So, we start general, we think about that, we decide, hey, is this something we want to try to give this more flexibility and a little bit more autonomy to the administration, or do we want to stick with what we've been doing? That's a great discussion, I think, for another time. And for me, I want to go back to the point we have, I think, talked about this budget a lot. We've made suggestions. There's been tons and tons and tons of questions. And if there's any further questions, there will be 3 readings, as we've discussed. And you can always ask Ron, or if we see some mistake in here, something that needs to be amended during the reading process, that's part of what readings are for. We can also amend the budget as we go. So technically, we have 3 more meetings we can discuss this. It's not like we're putting an end to it, but I think on this general large thing, for me, it's just like, and sit around the fireplace at a finance committee meeting, maybe the middle of next year, to talk about that moving into the next year's budget. And, regarding readings themselves, they serve several purposes. Sometimes it's for transparency, if it's a topic that the public would really want to maybe address council. Sometimes you have 3 readings because it's something controversial that you kind of want the public to speak about. Sometimes it's just a process that required. Sometimes you use them to amend motions and things like that, and actually correct the legislation as you go. But other times, we just have to make common sense decisions, right? And if administration comes and says this is an emergency, I'm not one to vote no on suspending readings for a matter of principle. I think you have to judge at each circumstance whether or not the severity of the instance dictates suspending the readings, or if it doesn't, and you can spend 3, or it needs to be rushed, but you feel like the public should have a couple opportunities to come in. So maybe you don't suspend on the first reading, but you hold a special meeting for the second. So we have options. And it's incumbent on the administrations to tell us that this is a fire burning down the city, kind of an emergency, and we need to pass this immediately. And for us to be trusting enough to believe that, and to do that at that point in time. So, I want to use this moment to motion that the budget that was presented to us today via email is placed on our next council meeting for first reading.
You have to have the legislation that goes with it.
I'm sorry?
What's that?
There has to be legislation, there has
Correct.
to be words that go with it.
Well, the legislation will have to accompany it, yes.
That's what I'm saying.
But, I'd like to move that our budget with the appropriate enacting legislation is placed on the agenda at our next council meeting, which is, the date would be, Mike, you're good
I
at
think it's
that.
The 20th,
Yeah.
Mr. Millanova.
20th it is.
Mr. President, if I could just make one clarification. There was actually one adjustment today that I did write down that was requested to increase fees in legislation. So I'm assuming that when you're motioning for this, that would include that adjustment.
Which
that
adjustment's
correct?
that?
So there was a request for an adjustment in legislation 702-523-400 to increase it to $5,000.
On Ms. DeWald's request to
Correct.
get our independent legal fees from 3,000 to 5?
Correct.
Sure, I can include that. It's fine.
Mr. President, I'll second his motion.
Give me a second here.
Sorry.
All right, so what I have here is a motion from Mr. Miller Novak to put this current version of the 2022 budget, including the request from tonight from Ms. DeWald, and obviously with the appropriate legislation, to have it on first reading for our next meeting on the 20th.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I just kind of have a question, I think. We always seem to do this in pieces. So I guess my question is, when are the salary ordinance and the cleanup ordinance? Are they kind of coming soon, or?
I'll refer to Ms.
Yeah, I think I did say it earlier, but I'll say, I mean, I think I did, but I did request for Mr. Mosby to have the salary ordinance for like our non-classified employees at our next finance committee meeting a week from today.
Okay.
And then also the law director's contract issue that we brought up and discussed at the committee of the whole meeting, to have that presented. And I also contacted Bill to make sure that that's in the works. And then, I feel like there's one more, the cleanup,
Yes.
that will be on our next finance
Yes.
meeting as well. So all those things will be waiting for you next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Got it.
All right, motion for Mr. Miller Novak, second by Ms. Zorb. Please call the roll, sir.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Blythe,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0, thank you. All right, any other old business?
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
super quick, on the legislation that Mr. Miller Novak referred to, will we have that in a timely manner before the next meeting, so that we'll have time to look it over, so that we'll be prepared for the next committee meeting?
The legislation that Mr. Miller Novak was referring to, he had asked me to have it ready for the finance committee meeting. So we do plan to have it by that time. I'm gonna do my best because
Ballpark,
we're,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because I know you and I spoke about some of those issues,
correct.
so, okay.
Ms. DeWald, I at least have, the last time Mr. Dieter sent the contract, it would be the same basic one. The legislation would just give Ron the authority to enter into it. I could, if you like send me an email or something, remind me, I could forward you a copy of that contract, or anybody else who needs it. Or I can just forward it to the whole committee. It's just someone remind me if I haven't done it by next Wednesday, like Wednesday or Thursday.
Any other old business?
Mr. President,
Ms. Blythe?
Mr. Miller Novak, you can do a tickler for yourself on your phone.
I don't want my phone to tickle me, that's weird. No, I just,
Listen, I went to secretarial school, so
Yeah.
I've never left that word behind, but like a tickler on
Yeah.
your phone or
I
something, or
know,
on
I'll
your calendar.
try. The problem
Sure that
is,
gets in the minutes.
it's an attorney problem. I got people to do that for me at work, so I'm pretty inept to do it for myself, so. But
If it will help, either you take care of
Responsibility.
it or I'll tickle you.
I'll definitely try to take care of it,
That is a
since we put it that way. What's that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
It was before computer laptop days. I still use that, though.
All right, let's move to new business. Any
Mr.
new
President.
business? Ms. DeWald?
I'll be really quick. Mr. Mosby, do we have intentions of ordering a nameplate for Mr., what's his name, Hedger? And then a key to the building, we were unable to meet.
I'll be your tickler tonight.
You said he needs to meet with Mr. Cole. And then to get paperwork for him to get back on the payroll. Or has that already been done?
Well, I know that he was already in the payroll system, so all he needed to really have done is to be activated again, but I can make sure, since it is.
I think it should be
new
up there.
Employment, that he makes sure that he fills out the current paperwork.
Okay, and then the second item, super quick, I'd like to discuss very briefly, because it shouldn't take much time at all, the January 1st swearing in. Typically, it's done, like January 1st, because it's always been a great big deal about all these new people coming in and getting elected. But because we're all here for a
You're
while,
saying it's not a big deal?
Old hat.
no, it's not a big deal. So I'm going to give council the option. We can have it on January 1st, or we can move it to like the first council meeting in January, and everybody would get sworn in at the same time. I'm not sure.
Do we not have to be sworn in by the 1st?
I think we have,
Till the 5th, I thought.
We have till the 5th?
I
Yeah.
think, that's a guess. Charter.
let's see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. So our first meeting would be on the 3rd.
Right.
I'll vote for the 3rd and not the 1st.
I'd be fine with that. Although I still think it's a big deal.
Well, okay, you can make it a big deal.
Mr. President,
You can come in on the 1st.
Mr. Miller Novak.
I mean, there are some people here that have been elected for the first time. I don't know if they want their families to come. I mean, my whole thing is like, just in case, like, I don't, if someone, because I mean, technically, and you just won like the first write-in candidate battle
Oh, well,
of
let's not go there.
NCH history.
So,
I mean, you made NCH history. I
Yeah,
mean, come
I've made it
on.
several times, but Mr. President, what my only inference onto, it's not a big deal, is the fact that it used to be, I mean, it was 14 people against 14 people,
Yeah.
and this was a very select group. So if we have it here, ICRC is all set up to film it. If we have it at the senior center like we've had in the times past, it's really cumbersome for ICRC because they really can't film it as accurately as they do here. But we can still party. We still have rooms to party in.
I'm fine as long as like I don't know like we probably don't want to over invite I guess for people who were elected because of the space we have here. But absolutely, I'm fine not having to come here on New Year's Day. I'm good. I'll go along with it.
So I will go through the charter again and see if I can find anything different than that. If so, I will email everyone, and I don't need a tickler. Also, I'd like to bring to council's attention the hard copies that may or may not be needed. I know as my term as clerk, it was an issue of who gives hard copies and who doesn't. I would like to make a motion that because we all have computers from the city, that we don't need to have the clerk issue hard copies to us. I know you're going to find it in here somewhere. It says all of them, he shall do that. But if you want a hard copy, you've got a laptop, print it yourself. And I'm going to fall on that sword too, because I'll be doing the same thing. I'll be running up here on the weekends to make copies.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
I'm fine with not receiving copies. I'm already in that status, but I don't have a, laptop. I'd use my own.
So, Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
until I have the Office suite on my laptop, my hands are kind of tied. I need a printed copy because I can't open things like the budget without having Excel. So I do need printed copies, so I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. President, how hastily I speak, because I'm in that same boat.
See,
Oh.
you just don't know your own pain
no,
yet.
You're on your own. We'll help Ms. Zorb, you're on your own.
Okay, fine.
Just kidding.
I'll just get the
Okay.
clerk to print them for me.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
Well, I think we kind of had been operating under the verbal, I don't need hard
Correct.
copies, and I don't need hard copies. Who still needs hard copies?
I'm gonna need it, because
So currently you have 3 that need hard copies, Mr. Hicks. If you would make
I
note,
forgot I don't have Microsoft Suites on. That's,
set up a
Council
tickler
one.
for yourself to remember to
We're gonna
print those
wear
hard
that out,
copies.
aren't we?
I'll send you a tickler.
Okay,
Mr. Graver will tickle you.
one other
Yeah,
thing
you only
that I
tickle
would
yourself,
like
I
to
understand.
bring up is also start looking at dates. We will need to do an organizational meeting by the 10th, correct?
Correct.
Mr. President,
Can we do it
Ms.
on
Blythe?
what are the plans? What's the agenda for the organizational meeting? I don't think I've attended one before. Thank you.
Seating chart and other things,
Committees.
committees, yeah, making sure all our committees are filled, thank you,
You're welcome.
and seating chart.
That's what experience gets you.
Okay.
All right, any other new business?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
not hearing any other new business, I'd like to make a motion we adjourn.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Ms. Zorb, second by Ms. DeWald. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Dukestein,
Yes.
DeWald,
Yes.
Underwood,
Yes.
Miller Novak,
Yes.
Zorb,
Yes.
Yes.
Anderson. I'm sorry, Blythe.
Yes.
Oops, just call you Skippy.
All right, that motion passes 7-0. Good meeting, everyone, thank you, we are adjourned.